Well, we're back. What's up, guys? Welcome back to Cards and Coffee. It's been a while since I've shot a video. I've had a lot of life stuff going on, a new job, new home, and of course I have my second baby now, so a lot of stuff on my plate. But in addition to all these new things, we also have a new ban list. We're going to be talking about a bunch of decks you could be potentially playing this format, plus some of the decks to return to the format that might not have been relevant recently. And in addition, I'll probably have a couple of decks at the end that, while I might not think they're the best decks of the format, it's definitely something that is a viable option that's at least worth testing. But before we get into it, as always, guys, please go grab yourself a cup of coffee or something. That way you guys can sit down and tune in. Let's do this. Alright, man, it feels great to be making videos again. I've actually been working on some stuff on the side and in the background. I have a couple of ideas and a couple series that I've been working on. I've also been working on some Time Wizard format stuff as well, so if you're interested in that, make sure you subscribe to the channel. That way you guys get notified when I finally release the series. But that's not why we're all here. Today, we're here to talk about the new format and all the decks that come into the meta. Now, I'm not going to go through every card on the ban list, and you guys know me, I don't really do a reaction video for that kind of thing. But if you guys are trying to figure out what decks to bring to your locals or an upcoming regional or even the upcoming YCSs, I think I have a good list of decks for you guys to consider or at least give a test. I definitely think there is a lot of viable options this format. The fact that Tearlaments is still a deck but is severely watered down really makes way for a lot of decks that really have been pushed out of the format to finally make its way back in. Not only that, but of course there's new things coming into the format with Photon Hypernova. We have the Kashtira getting all its support, and I'm actually very excited to see how that deck affects the format. But in addition to that, we have a bunch of decks that have been waiting for their time to return, and today just might be their day. So I'm not going to go over these decks in any particular order, but I will mention some of the ones that I think are the most relevant or at least worth testing this format. And in addition, I have a small list at the end of some other decks that may actually have a place in this format, depending on how these things play out. For the first deck I wanted to talk about, of course, Kashtira is the deck on everybody's mind. Unhit on the ban list, new support coming out, and of course a Macrocosmos on legs, plus potentially locking out all your monster zones can be a very horrifying thing for really any deck to go up against. Kashtira is just full of a bunch of extenders, and there's so many different things you can do with it. Whether you're playing it pure or what people were trying to do was play it with Tearlaments, which really I don't see as much of an option anymore. But probably one of my favorite things that you can do with the Kashtira deck is play the Adventure Engine. So many people have forgotten about the amazing Water Enchantress and what that engine can do. And while I don't think every Kashtira deck will be playing this engine, I definitely think it's a super viable thing to do going forward. Now again, I've been kind of busy recently, but I have been putting my time in testing whenever I can and playing online. And I really have been shying away from the adventure package in the Kashtira deck just because the Tearlaments decks had 3 Kelbeck at their disposal. So the second you go to use Fateful Adventure to add a card and then discard a card, they get to go ahead and summon that Kelbeck and bounce the token. And now your adventure package is useless. But now with Kelbeck at 1, yeah, it still can happen, but it's a one-of, so it's really not that much of a scare. And of course, like I just mentioned, all the amazing things that come with it, it just really insulates not only your combo, but your end board from getting wiped out with something like Evenly Matched or any of those other blowout cards like Book of Eclipse or something of that nature as well. I'm going to be doing a couple of Kashtira deck profiles here coming up, so again, if that's something you want to see, make sure you're subscribed. That way you guys get notified when it's posted. But for sure, one of the lists that I'm going to be showing you is the adventure one, so make sure you stick around for that. I think that list is a lot of fun to play. Now, the next deck I kind of want to talk about is Branded. Not too long ago, Branded Despia was one of the best decks of the format. So many people were playing D-barriers and anti-spells and doing everything in their power to stop this deck. After a while, it got power crept and kind of went into the shadows, but slowly the deck has been getting more and more support, and of course now with all the Bestials in the game, that even adds more consistency to this deck. If I'm I'm completely honest, this deck is 10 times better than it was when it was considered the best deck. And now with all the Tearlament shufflers being at 1, this deck, oh man, it got so much better. Now the addition of these Bestials really helped this deck out, but it's a double-edged sword. It also hurts the deck. Really, in a format where everybody's maining a bunch of Bestials, it could be very hard for this deck to flourish. But now that Kashtira's in the format, it might not be worth it to main those anymore. Now, there might be some people that are going to be siding it, which of course it's a really amazing thing against your deck, but with cards like Triple Tactics Thrust coming into the game, yeah, if I get hit with a Bestial, I don't think I'm going to care because now I get to search Branded Fusion, which is pretty insane. Oh, and speaking of Thrust, that can also search that Rite of Aramasir we were just talking about with the Kashtira deck. Now again, Despia definitely has a great chance this format. I guess it's going to really come out to what is going on in the meta, but I will say, as a Despia player, staring down a Macro Cosmos could definitely be something very scary to deal with. So whether or not it's something that's going to climb its way to the best deck of the format, I guess time will tell. I definitely think the potential's there, but again, as the format unfolds, we're definitely going to see where it lands in the ladder. Now, before moving on to some other decks that haven't had a chance to shine, I figured I might as well talk about Tearlament. Personally, I think the deck is still a deck and can function fairly well. Looking at some of the more recent lists that people have been posting, it's really sad to look at. I'm not saying they're bad lists or anything, but just to look at it now from what it was, yeah, I don't know. The deck looks, it's not great. Now again, the deck can pretty much do the same thing it's always done. Again, it's not as consistent, doesn't have good grind, and of course with the shufflers being down, that makes it to where other decks can play a lot better. But one thing, like I mentioned with Branded, that is kind of nice for the deck is the Bestials will probably be moving more towards the side deck. And again, with something like Thrust in the format now, that also is a card that could potentially search you Instant Fusion, which is something that's been kind of talked about in the community for a while now. Now, don't get me wrong, I am going to be testing Tearlament out more and more. I really do enjoy playing the deck, but as of right now, I don't know if it's going to be my first choice of a deck to bring going into this format. Now, the next deck is one that in the beginning was the devil of the format and then eventually became a fan favorite. Sword Soul is one amazing deck, and it looks to be in an even better position than it was this last format. Now, some people have already been topping with Sword Soul with tier at the power they are now. So now that everything's been really weakened in power and really pushed out of the way, I don't see a reason this deck cannot take the meta by storm. Like with any deck, it has flaws. It's not the highest ceiling deck, but with the Tangies, you have a lot of power and consistency. The deck isn't super graveyard reliant, so maybe you would cut back on some of the Tangy stuff just because of the Macro Cosmos on leg with the Kashtira deck. Also, another unfortunate thing in the Kashtira matchup is that your Moyi and your Taya won't get to dump or draw cards for you because they won't hit the grave. But again, there's just so many good things going for this deck. I'm very curious to see how it plays out. Now, moving on to a deck that I really enjoyed playing, but the ban list really hit it hard. That deck would be Spright. Elf being gone really is a necessary thing in my eyes. I think the card is way too generic, but it's just unfortunate that Spright is the one that really gets to suffer for it being banned. I really don't see a world that you're playing pure Spright. Maybe you can make it work, but again, there's so many different ways to go about building this deck, and that's why I feel like it's still going to have a place in the meta. Of course, you still have like live twin combos you can do, even though that makes you weaker to Bestials, so that might not be the best option to go. But of course, we still have all the runic cards at our disposal, and honestly, that kind of seems like the best way to go. I'm not entirely sure if something like a pure runic deck would be the way to go this format or anything like that, but when you combine them with the Sprites, you really have a solid deck to really control the pace of where the game's going, and of course, you could also potentially deck your opponent out in the process. It's a good deck for sure. But one quick note while we're talking about Spright, some people have also suggested playing the Tri-Brigade variant of it, but in my opinion, I think the Elf is actually a really important piece to that puzzle. Normally you'll do your Spright combo and then afterwards use Elf to bring something like Kit or Karas back. That way you can start doing the Tri-Brigade stuff at the end. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm crazy, but I really don't think that that's the route you should be going if you are playing Spright. Now, I will say, since we're talking about Tri-Brigade, don't forget we still have double Recital Starling. This card came back to 2 last format where it was super irrelevant, and it probably could have come back to 3, but Tri-Brigade could still go the bird up route. It pretty much has everything at its disposal. Now, technically we don't have Samorg, but we lost that a while ago, but I'm definitely thinking there's something there, so if you're looking for something more of a rogue option, or maybe something that's more of a sleeper deck, I definitely think that's something you guys could consider. Now, speaking of rogue or sleeper decks that people might have forgotten about, let's talk about Dark World. Dark World is a crazy deck. I'm pretty sure if you've gone anywhere on YouTube to look at any of the combo videos that people post, you can see this deck spit out some of the craziest boards that really any deck can ever make. The deck draws an infinity of cards, it breaks boards, man, it could rip your hand to pieces. But the fact that everybody and their mom has been maining so many Bestials to hate on the full-powered Tearlaments, and of course that Tearlaments have had 6 shufflers in their deck, there was no way for this deck to thrive. However, shufflers are now at 1, and like I mentioned, I really feel like the Bestials are going to be going to the side. So game 1s for this Dark World deck could be really scary to go against. Now again, am I saying this is going to be the best deck of the format? It has the highest ceiling, it's going to clap everything up that's in its way? No, but trust me, this deck is horrifying, and honestly, it's pretty cheap to build as well. Now this all sounds really great, but don't forget, there's the macrocosmos on legs that every deck's going to be staring at now in the form of a Rise Heart. So yeah, maybe still this deck would be having a hard time. I guess the right build in the right place, maybe you have to play these Board Breakers, the Dark Rulers, maybe the Book of Eclipses. This deck is more of a combo deck to where you want a lot of pieces to really enable you playing. But hey, Dark World, I love the deck, and I hope it can find a place in the meta. I think it would definitely mix things up. Now, another deck I thought worth mentioning would be the Pendulum deck, now that the Endymion engine's basically at full power. I don't think this is going to take the meta by storm by any means. I definitely think there's some cool things you can do with it because the deck really is not graveyard reliant at all, which is a great thing against the Kashtira deck. I don't know, there definitely could be something that Pendulum can do this format. I'd be very curious to see how it plays out, and I definitely think it's something worth testing. For the last deck I really wanted to talk about, I don't know how relevant this is going to be, but again, just like some of the other rogue or sleeper decks, I figured I'd mention it because, well, there's a little bit of hype behind it right now. Lithogasm has gone to 3, so now all the Dino players are super happy and wanting to go full combo. People really want to slap down Tyranno and Dolka again, and I understand it. The deck can OTK out of nowhere as well. Plus, with the addition of Lithogasm, now you're ripping cards out of your opponent's extra deck, which is insane this format. So there's definitely going to be some merit playing this deck in this format. But again, this is just like the last couple of decks. It's something to consider, something to test, and I'm definitely curious to see how it plays out. There's some other decks out there as well. There's the Gold Pride with the Punks. There's also like the Therion support with the Exceed that searches the Therions. I don't know how big of a splash those cards are going to make in this meta, but they're also very viable things that are at least worth the test in a format that seems to be a lot more open. But just like the other videos, please comment down below. Let me know what you think. Maybe I missed a deck, or maybe I'm sleeping on something. You guys just gotta let me know. Oh, and before people ask, Fluanderies as a deck can still function, no problem, but, you know, without the wind statue, I don't know what you do, bro. Thanks again for tuning in. I really appreciate all the support. It feels so great to be back. And like I said, I have other videos coming out soon. I have a lot of meta stuff, more deck profiles, and like I said, a retro series coming out as well for Time Wizard format. So if that's something you're into, please be subscribed, turn on the notification bell. That way you guys can see when it comes up. And here's hoping to see you guys on the next one. Peace.